like that. It's it's the last session, but the good thing about it is we know that we've got some people online, and hello to you onliners. So it's wonderful that people are able to join these sessions from all the way around Australia and beyond. And we're at the last part of the Community Partnerships in Action stream, but we can always dip back into it. So we know that they're online in an ongoing way, so the conversation can keep going. If you're online or in the room and you want to ask a question, do use the capacity to do that so that we can take that forward. I'm delighted to introduce our last speaker for today, Lana Andrews. She's from the Tamworth Regional Landcare Association and talking about trees in the ground, landholders restoring koala habitat. And don't we need that?
Well, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for having me and for that introduction. So today I'll be covering a project that we did in our particular region about koala habitat restoration. So I'm currently the Regional Agriculture Landcare Facilitator for the Northwest, and I've been with Landcare for a number of years. Before I begin, I just wanted to acknowledge the Gadigal people of the Eora Nation, the traditional custodians of the lands on which we're meeting today, and to pay my respects to elders past, present and emerging. I'd also like to pay my respects to the Gomeroi people, and the project was conducted on their land, and the Gomeroi people cover the northwest of New South Wales. So today I'll be talking about the community partnerships that we created over a 5-year period for this particular project, and I'd like to cover how we exceeded our goals through having these particular partnerships. So this Gunnedah koala habitat restoration project for Gunnedah and the Liverpool Plains, it was done over a 5-year period, and we created a number of partnerships through a network of government, non-government, and also volunteer organisations. So this particular project was supported by the local landcare coordinator for the Liverpool Plains. And over that time period, there were 3 of us. So I started the project and then other colleagues completed it over that time. I just wanted to acknowledge my colleagues Ali Chaffey and Penny Milson, who put a lot of time and effort into this project over the time period. So today I'll be covering a few topics. So the first one is the value of investing in individual groups and partnerships and relationships. And I'll also talk a bit about how we engaged with rural communities and how we supported collaboration and used their local knowledge, how a community of practice was formed throughout the project, and also how we achieved and exceeded our goals through the partnerships that we made. So where is Gunnedah and the Liverpool Plains? So we're in northwest New South Wales, and these 2 local government areas cover about 10,000 square kilometres. So it's quite a big area, and it's agricultural land. So we have industries, beef, sheep, cotton, broadacre cropping and grains, amongst others. And these photos here are fairly typical of our landscape. So it is highly modified, highly cleared, but there are some remnants of native vegetation, lots of scattered paddock trees, which our koalas do use, and corridors that have been implemented by landholders in the past as well. And I'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So what do we know about koalas in northwest New South Wales? So we know they face an uncertain future, which is fairly typical of populations across a lot of our country. And in our particular areas, they're considered sparse. They've suffered a significant decline since 2009, and the main reasons are from chlamydia, from droughts and from heat waves, and to a lesser extent from dog attacks and also car accidents. So we know that koalas west of the divide, they traverse private land. So it's critically important for us to engage private landholders to help maintain and restore and improve our koala habitat. And in our region, Landcare's in a really good position to support these types of re-veg projects because we do have partnerships and the local knowledge and good community connections to get these projects done. So, Project Snapshot, just to give you a bit of a view on what it's all about. We received funding through Saving Our Species over 2 rounds, $145,000. We had 12 partners and 16 landholders involved, and we proposed to establish 30 hectares of koala corridors, and in actual fact we planted 45, which I'll talk a bit more about in a moment. We had small and large projects across private properties, with the largest being at just over 10 hectares. We also delivered some different events. We delivered 5 events over the time period, and we had 13 media articles and segments over the time. So this is a fairly typical view of an individual landholder project. So this was our largest one, and it was on a property where the private landholders were very experienced in establishing corridors. So this particular project was linking those, and it was linking to remnant vegetation already there. The project was established based on best practice corridor guidelines provided by our ecologist. So we made sure that we had a great mix of food and shelter trees and also other species to make sure that biodiversity was enhanced and attracted other species as well. And wherever possible, we sourced local provenance to ensure survivability of our seedlings. So as I mentioned before, we had 12 partners over 5 years. So some of these partners made up a project steering committee, which was really critical in ensuring the success of this particular project. And that was made up of our local council, local land services, which is our NRM body. We had the chair of our local landcare group, our funding body, and also our local ecologist. So that steering committee was really critical for a number of reasons. The first one was during our implementation phase. So our ecologist was able to provide that local intel, survey data on where our populations were, but also where the gaps were in terms of koala habitat. And that meant we were then able to target specific areas where landholders could be engaged to be a part of this particular project. They were also really critical in terms of event design and delivery, so they provided a lot of our technical expertise. The committee also provided an unbiased view when they were assessing expressions of interest from our landholders. So we had a diverse number of landholders there, as you can see, and I think that also represented, diverse number of partners, and we had a diverse number of landholders too who were engaged. So we had anywhere from people with small lifestyle blocks right up to large, broad-scale cropping properties that were involved. So our largest property was 21,000 hectares. So we wanted to make sure that science underpinned practice, and we did this through partnerships. And one of our main partners was the University of Sydney. So they've been surveying koalas in our particular area for a number of years, and they provided the latest research and data on our populations at several events. We also made sure, as Landcare being the main support partner for this project, that we were in constant contact with them to make sure that we were delivering the right data and research to our landholders on ground to get their projects done. We also had local land services and our local landcare group, Gunnedah Urban. They were really important because they provided that technical expertise for us and resources. So they did a lot of the how-to for our landholders, particularly through events, how to plan a site, how to plant a site, and how to maintain a site as well. And finally, we had our local ecologists do individual property assessments. So before landholders engaged in a contract to plant corridors, our ecologist went on to each property, did an assessment of what's the existing native vegetation, where might the gaps be, did a biodiversity assessment, but also looked at water availability as well. This is an example of some of the resources that we provided to landholders. The one on the left was actually created as a result of this project. So we found there was a need for very specific information for people in terms of what to plant and where and for what particular soils. So this resource is now more widely available throughout our region, and it's a really important one to help our populations and to help landholders make those key decisions. So we found a personal approach was really one of the big keys to the success of this project, and Landcare was the key partner or the key support. And we knew that without the interest and the support and the buy-in, if you like, from these private landholders, we would not get any trees in. And so this was done through a multiple of ways, and one of them was consistent farm visits. So we made sure that we had constant face-to-face contact with our contract landholders through regular meetings with Landcare, through the ecologist visits, through our landholders hosting events, and at times through media interviews as well. So we had multifaceted landholder contact, and my predecessor, Penny Milson, was particularly good at this. She was particularly good at keeping in contact with everyone along the way, and this actually helped identify issues that could be resolved before they became larger and unresolvable. So she was very good at that. One of the big things we did too was cultivate landholder ownership. So they decided where they would like to put their corridors in, and then that was then discussed with our ecologist and local land services. So we made sure that the landholders were happy because it has to be part of their production and part of their farm business. So they were part of that decision-making process on where they would like to put the corridors in and how. We made paperwork really simple. That evolved over 5 years and changed, and it helped people engage with the process and get things done in a really efficient way. And that was due to a very good relationship with our funder, Saving Our Species. And finally, that personal approach can be, I suppose, described in the word of mouth, which was really critical for engagement. And so what I mean by that is a great example is our wires carer. She's on these properties all day, every day, caring for sick and injured koalas. She knows the areas where the koalas are. She knows where the gaps in habitat is, and she knows the types of people that might like to be a part of this. And so that local knowledge was really important when it came to where are we going to target where we might like to deliver this and the types of people that we might like to be involved. So I just wanted to talk about two partners who initially weren't engaged because at the time there wasn't a need. However, during the project we found that these partners added a great deal of value. And the first one is JobLink Plus. So they provide employment services and vocational training for people. They mobilised volunteers to help support some of our landholders in planting trees. So our landholders were coming up against a few challenges in terms of getting their trees in on time. And so these volunteers helped those projects to get done, get the trees in, but at the same time, they were able to achieve their Certificate 3 in horticulture. So it was a real win-win situation for both parties there. The other partner that I just wanted to mention was the WISE program and the tree troughs. So tree troughs are a watering system for native fauna, and they were designed by a local farmer, Rob Friend, and that was as a result of research which found that koalas do indeed drink water, particularly in our region. And so now most of our landholders have a tree trough in their corridor system, which is really critical. Not only do they have their food and shelter trees, but they also have water, which is really important during dry periods and drought. In a nutshell, we recognise that bringing together this specialist expertise and strengths from lots of different avenues and lots of partners was crucial because we can't do it all, and that partnerships are really essential for these private landholder projects. So with public land projects, government agencies in particular might have the resources, the funding, the people and the technical expertise. But a lot of these private landholders don't necessarily have access to that. So we found by partnering with these different organisations, they were able to then support these private landholders in getting their trees in and their corridors completed. And we feel like we've achieved lots of multiple outcomes, not just for the people involved, but also for our koala populations. So some of these successes, we had 100% contract compliance. Everyone got their trees in and their corridors completed. We have koalas using these corridors, which is fantastic. We received a second round of funding because our funder was really happy with how the first round went. We exceeded our number of planned hectares, and that was due to a number of reasons, but I suppose the big one was our landholders and local land services and our ecologist looked at the areas where best value for money could be achieved. And that was looking at areas that were already fenced, because we know that fencing is a really big cost when it comes to these types of projects. And we also leveraged off the Landcare Support Program. So by Landcare supporting this, we were able to really put the most value or the most money into the on-ground activities. A community of practice was formed where people came together over a number of events through shared meetings with Landcare, and so that meant that there's now a lovely network of people who meet on a regular basis to discuss koalas and future projects for the area. These project landholders engage in other landcare programs now. They've joined Landcare, so we have an increase in memberships, and our local member is constantly advocating for future funding for koala populations. So I think our success is social in this sense. We can look at the numbers, which is really nice, and look at what we've achieved there, but there's this intrinsic value of I've done something really nice for my farm or more broadly for our region. And I think the project was designed in a way that made it socially successful. And a really good indicator of that was a celebratory event that we ran just to recognise the shared efforts of everyone involved. Most of our landholders and our partners attended this, and we had some great media coverage, and we had our local member there. And it was a really nice way to celebrate the successes of what everyone had achieved. And I just wanted to end on this note, which is a really nice quote from one of our project landholders. I think almost anything humans do today can be seen to have a negative impact on our unique planet, from ploughing a paddock to opening a plastic water bottle. As farmers in particular, it's nice to do something that's positive for the planet, such as planting a tree corridor on our property. The SOS funding has been very much appreciated. However, we found just as much value in the deadline and accountability that signing a funding contract provided. It forced us to act on something that we intrinsically wanted to do, but unfortunately may have taken a number of years to become a priority under the normal stresses of running a business. The experience has been extremely satisfying. We're very proud of our completed corridor and look forward to watching it grow. Thank you very much. I hope I haven't put you to sleep like these little fellas up here. If you'd like to know anything else about the project, I've got case studies here, or please come and have a chat. And thank you very much for having me today.
We've got time for a couple of questions, and if there's any questions from people online, if you can pop them in, yes.
Thanks for a great talk. Peter Dixon from the Australian Association of Bush Regenerators. I was wondering whether you incorporated vertebrate pest predator control as well in part of your project to make sure the corridors were safe to use when the koalas went down to the ground.
Yeah, that's a really good question. So we had a limited amount of funding to get the corridors in, and we did run a session on those particular topics. So our landholders are very aware of keeping things out like tiger pear and other predators out like that. And we did look at certain fencing options as well to make sure that koalas were safe to use the corridors. So in terms of funding, we didn't incorporate that specifically into project design. However, our community engagement did cover those topics through some of our events.
Any more questions?
Yes, George Savik from Torres Strait. So
how are the numbers with koalas? Have they improved a lot, or is just gradually getting there, or no?
That's a great question, and it's actually a really complex one. So I did have a chat to our local ecologist a couple of weeks ago to ask that exact question. So I worked on this project initially, however, my other role meant that I was sort of distanced a little bit, and so I really did want to find that out. And so what we've found is that due to drought, particularly in chlamydia, there's been that massive decline that I described. And I think the decline, it's got down to about 20% of the population of what it would have been a couple of decades ago. So there's varying reports. Some of our landholders are reporting really stable populations. Others are reporting not having seen koalas in the last 12 to 18 months. We did think that with better conditions in terms of more rainfall and things, and with trees, surviving, their chemical composition being good for feeding and that sort of thing, that we would find the population starting to improve. But in actual fact, we've found chlamydia has been a real issue still. So the population, it's really uncertain and it's really hard to know where we'll go. And so providing that habitat obviously is just one way that we can hopefully bring it up to a more stable situation.
Yeah, right. Is it better to plant like two or three trees together than one tree, or do you guys do it differently?
So these corridors are made up of thousands of trees, so there's a particular standard, a certain distance that we plant trees apart, and also the tree lines that we plant as well, and making sure we plant a good diversity of species as well, a good balance of food, shelter and other species. So there are thousands of trees which are planted near each other, yeah.
Time for another question or two.
Quick one. How long before a corridor becomes viable for koalas to go along?
Sorry, I missed that one.
So how long? I mean, you're planting all these trees, but obviously they're small trees.
Yes, yes.
So what's the viability, and doesn't that take like an awfully long time, or are they immediately helpful in some other way?
No, it does take a while to play a part either for food or for shelter. So I have talked to some of our project landholders. So the ones that put trees in 5 years ago, so when we first started the project, they have found koalas using those trees. So they are several feet high. So I guess it depends on the population and the types of species as well as to whether you will use them at a certain age period. But yes, there is a period of time you do have to wait. Obviously, you'll get bird species and other things in though in that early initial stages. Yeah.